Washington, D.C., 1962. The air was heavy with politics and paranoia. Every diplomat had a smile, every smile hid a secret, and every secret could start a war. The Cold War was at its peak, a world divided not by bombs, but by whispers. She arrived quietly. No fanfare. No one even remembered the exact day her car passed through the embassy gates. Her name was Elena Morozova, Soviet, mid-30s, elegant, fluent in English. Officially, a cultural attaché. Unofficially, something else entirely. To the men who met her at diplomatic receptions, she was magnetic. Not beautiful in the usual sense, but calm, poised, mysterious. She listened more than she spoke, and when she did, her words felt rehearsed, but never forced. Her presence lingered. Her perfume, faint and deliberate, seemed to follow the conversation even after she left. She knew how Americans thought. Their confidence, their loneliness, their pride. The KGB had trained her for that. She wasn't sent to steal documents or plant bugs. Her mission was far more dangerous. She was sent to make someone talk. It happened one evening at a Georgetown cocktail party. A young CIA analyst named Thomas Reed was standing near the piano, bored, holding a glass of bourbon. He noticed her before she noticed him. Or maybe she made it look that way. Either way, he smiled. She smiled back. He worked in Soviet analysis. Nothing glamorous, just reports, cables, logistics, but information flows like rivers, and he stood close enough to the source. She asked him questions, harmless ones, about his job, his travels, his favorite jazz band. When he answered, she listened as if every word mattered. That night he couldn't stop thinking about her. That was step one. They met again, at first by accident, then by design. Coffee near Dupont Circle, walks by the Potomac. She asked about his work again, only this time she mixed it with laughter, glances, silence. He felt trusted, seen. Within months, she was inside his apartment and inside his confidence. He didn't know that somewhere in Moscow, her name had a code name, Violet Sparrow. The KGB had built her from scratch. False background, polished accent, perfect cover. Every step of her life was designed to lead here, the moment she became indispensable to a man with access. At first, it wasn't about secrets, just opinions. Then, quiet hints. Do you think the US really knows how strong the Soviet missiles are? Does your department share reports with the Pentagon? Innocent questions, dressed as curiosity. Thomas Reed, flattered and naive, answered, a phrase here, a date there, nothing classified. Or so he told himself. But each piece fit into a larger puzzle Moscow was already building. Soon envelopes appeared under his door. Anonymous, unsigned, inside cash. Small at first. He panicked. She calmed him. They're not paying you, she said softly. They're thanking you. He believed her. The KGB didn't need guns or blackmail. They had Elena. Her power wasn't fear, it was affection. She made men forget the line between love and loyalty. By 1963, the Soviets had detailed knowledge of several US intelligence operations in Eastern Europe, files that only a handful of analysts had seen. One of them was Thomas Reed. No alarms were raised. The leak was perfect, invisible. Elena was everywhere and nowhere. Her apartment was clean, her phone tapped, her mail filtered through diplomatic pouches. She lived two lives, one written in ink, one in code. When the CIA looked at her, they saw a foreign diplomat doing her job. They didn't see the camera hidden in her powder case or the microfilm capsules hidden in her lipstick. But every agent knows perfection can't last. In late 1964, a message from Langley warned of a mole. Someone was feeding information to the Soviets. The net began to tighten. Files were checked, access lists reviewed. Thomas Reed felt the pressure but didn't suspect her, not for a second. Then came the night she vanished. No goodbye, no trace. Just a locked apartment, an unmade bed, and the faint smell of her perfume. For months he searched, letters unanswered, embassy silent. Only later did he learn the truth, that she had been recalled to Moscow, successful, untouchable. her mission complete. In Langley's records, her name appeared only once, redacted, classified, erased. But for the CIA, she became a ghost story, a warning whispered to every new recruit. Beware the ones who smile too easily. Beware the ones who listen too closely. And somewhere in the grey halls of Moscow's Lubyanka, a file marked Violet Sparrow was stamped with one word: accomplished. She had done what no bomb or missile ever could. She made the CIA fall in love. Question for you: do you think seduction is the most powerful weapon in espionage, or just the most dangerous illusion? Washington, D.C., 1963. The city breathed in secrets and exhaled lies. Elena walked through it like a ghost in daylight. She knew the rhythm now, the hours when clerks grew careless, the windows that reflected too much, the corners where microphones never quite reached. Thomas Reed thought he was in control. That was the trick. She never pushed. She waited. She let silence do the work. He filled it with trust. It began with a note under a sugar bowl. A time, a street, nothing else. He went, of course he went. She arrived with rain on her coat and a smile that belonged to no country. They spoke of music, of childhood, of the way Washington smelled after a thunderstorm. Then came the question that wasn't a question. If you could stop a war by sharing a rumor, would you do it? His answer wasn't yes. It wasn't no. It was a story about his father and a draft card and a belief that truth should never be weaponized. She listened. She nodded. She set the hook with gentleness. Tradecraft replaced courtship. A book on a park bench with a page bent at 45 degrees, a matchbox under the fourth slat of a bus stop seat, chalk marks at knee height near a mailbox on M Street, dead drops that felt like games, brush passes that felt like accidents. Her hands never trembled, his did. She never asked for a document. She asked for a detail, a timing, a code name heard in a hallway. He gave her fragments. She gave him peace, the steady illusion that he wasn't betraying anything, only smoothing the edges of a dangerous world. The KGB called it convincing the conscience, make the man believe he's saving lives, make him believe he is still good. A Minox camera appeared one night as casually as a candle. She placed it on his coffee table and didn't look at it. He stared at the chrome and the shutter like a priest staring at a sin. Only if you choose, she said. He chose. He photographed summaries, not originals. Covers, not contents. Classification stamps and routing slips. Enough to prove what moved where. Enough to map the bloodstream of Langley. 1,000 tiny capillaries revealed by a few inches of film. Moscow Center was patient. Reports traveled inside lipstick tubes, inside hollowed-out fountain pens, inside the lining of a black glove that no one wore in summer. Her control officer watched from across diners, never meeting her eyes, tipping too much for bad coffee. Her legend was airtight. Her life was not. The first real test came with a rumor of a defector, a whisper that a Soviet officer wanted to trade his life for a new name and an American backyard. The CIA moved quietly. Elena moved faster. Thomas passed a schedule, incomplete and imprecise. Enough to set an ambush, enough to make the river of trust run backward. The defector never made it to the safe house. He vanished between airport lights and the edge of a taxi's door. Langley called it bad luck. The KGB called it cleaning. Guilt arrived like a slow fever. Thomas asked fewer questions. He slept with the radio on. He told himself the defector had changed his mind. He told himself a lot of things. Eleanor told him nothing. That was mercy. That was cruelty. She pivoted to psychology. No more schedules, no more stamped covers. She wanted models. How the agency predicted Soviet troop movements from rail timetables. How analysts weighted rumors versus telemetry. The logic, not the paper. It was safer for him, more valuable for her. The KGB didn't want maps. They wanted the compass. Counterintelligence began to stir. A committee with fluorescent lights and tired eyes, audits of access logs, changes in night shift patterns, polygraphs that hummed like angry beehives. Thomas sat with sensors on his fingers and told a machine he had nothing to hide. The needle danced. The examiner frowned. The report said, inconclusive. That word saves jobs. That word ends lives. Elena adapted. Meetings shortened, signals changed. A torn theatre ticket placed north-south instead of east-west. A newspaper folded twice on a bench rather than once. If the pattern broke, the meeting died. Survival by choreography. One night she showed him a photograph, not of troop movements, not of a missile site, a photograph of them, reflected in the cafe window months earlier. His face turned toward her, hers turned toward the glass. Proof that someone else had been there. Someone with a longer lens and colder blood. "We should stop," she said, "for your safety." He shook his head. That was when she knew he would never be the one to end it. The work deepened. He slipped into records rooms with a pocket watch and a heartbeat for a metronome. 90 seconds per folder, 30 for the shot, 30 to breathe, 30 to put the world back exactly as he found it. He learned the song of each lock. He learned the patience of dust. She rewarded him with distance. Fewer meetings, longer gaps, more longing. Absence is a handler's second-best asset after fear. He chased her shadow through the city like a man looking for a constellation at noon. Moscow asked for something impossible. A list of CIA informants inside Eastern Europe, names that bled when spoken. Elena said no. Quietly, firmly. Her control officer pushed. She didn't move. Not because she cared about the names, because she cared about the asset. Break him on this and you lose him. The center relented. Not forever. Long enough. Langley promoted Thomas to a task force with a better view of the chessboard. That made him valuable. That made him visible. A whisper campaign began. New face. Too lucky. People in windowless rooms learned to smell luck like cordite. She changed tactics again. Confessions instead of requests. She told him about a childhood that maybe was hers and maybe wasn't. A winter of black bread and silence, a father who disappeared into a factory and never walked out. He reached for her hand, the way a drowning man reaches for air. He didn't notice that she was the ocean. He gave her a routing schema for cables moving from Europe to Langley. It wasn't explosive, it was exquisite. With it, the KGB could time false flags to hit analysts when they were most tired, most hurried, most likely to pass a lie through because it was almost true. Deception rides best on the shoulders of routine. Then the first crack. An operation in Prague burned overnight. A safe apartment raided with surgical precision. The CIA blamed a sloppy courier. The KGB congratulated a patient sparrow. Thomas read the sitrep with a cold jaw and a hot spine. He felt the shape of her hand on the edge of the page. He kept reading. Elena's world narrowed. Her mail scanner hummed. Her apartment was swept twice a week by a man who never smiled. She found a microphone behind a baseboard heater. Not CIA, not FBI. Her own side, checking the checker. Trust is a fairy tale in the business of truth. She met Thomas in a church with bad acoustics and better shadows. He asked the question he swore he would never ask. "Who are you when I'm not watching?" She answered with the only honest sentence of her career. "I am whoever you need me to be, until the work is finished." Winter came hard. Snow softened the city's edges but sharpened its ears. Signals switched to heat, a warm coin on a windowsill, a steaming cup on an outdoor table 10 minutes before a meeting that would never happen. The code said danger. The code said wait. Counterintelligence moved from suspicion to geometry, timelines overlaid, bad outcomes pinned to good coincidences. A pattern emerged, faint as frost. It pointed not at her, diplomatic cover holds like iron, but at the man who loved her more than he loved his own safety. The summons was polite, a conference room with no conference. Two men who had forgotten how to blink. Questions that sounded like statements. He held together for an hour, then began to fray. not with confessions, with doubt. Doubt is louder than guilt under fluorescent light. That night he went to the river, wind like wire, water like lead. She joined him without being asked. They stood with silence between them like a third person. He told her about the room. She told him nothing about Moscow. They agreed on one truth. This couldn't last. She offered him an exit that wasn't real, a transfer, a desk, a smaller life with fewer keys. He said he could live with that. She knew he couldn't. The game had rewritten him. The only way out was a door that didn't exist. She left first. She always did. He watched her walk away and realized something too late. It had never been a love story. It had been a lesson. He was the student. She was the exam. Weeks later, a dead drop came up empty for the first time, then a second, then a third. The chalk marks stopped appearing. The city felt bigger, colder. He waited anyway. Faith is a habit that kills slower than poison. When the message finally came, it was 10 words on onion paper. No more meetings. Burn everything. You were never here. V. He read it twice. He burned it. He didn't move. The wind lifted ash that looked like snow and wasn't. In Moscow, a cable arrived with her code name and a single line of praise. In Langley, a file thickened around his name like ice around a branch. 2 stories, same ending, different alphabets. The game had done what it always does. It didn't break the rules. It broke the players. Question for you. If you were Thomas, would you confess to save yourself, or keep the secret to protect the person who used you? Vienna, 1960s, not Washington, not Moscow. A city of chandeliers and wiretaps, neutral on paper, not in practice. This is where the manuals were written in whispers, where seduction became a syllabus, where the KGB perfected a weapon the West pretended didn't exist. They didn't call it love. They called it compromat, information that stains. A photograph angled a degree too low, a letter phrased a degree too warm, a signature obtained in a room with curtains that never moved. The goal wasn't the bed. It was the leash, not pleasure, leverage. The KGB taught that people don't betray because they are evil. They betray because they are seen, needed, forgiven. Seduction wasn't roses. It was absolution. Elena studied like a surgeon. Not faces, fault lines, the distance between a wedding ring and a wallet. The seconds it took a man to answer a simple question. The way a joke landed in a room of uniforms. She learned the angles of guilt, the choreography of need. She learned that silence is not absence, it's consent to proceed. In training, they gave her a mirror and told her to never bring herself to work. Wear the target like a coat, the instructor said, then hang it back up. Operation Honeytrap didn't start with Thomas. It started with a dictionary, the KGB's dictionary for Americans. Lonely, recruitable, ambitious, recruitable, divorced, recruitable, devout, recruitable, if ashamed. The trick was never to invent desire. It was to arrive where desire already lived and give it a purpose, a cause dressed as a confidant. Washington, 1964. She mapped the city like a bloodstream, embassy parties as arteries, hotel bars as capillaries. She watched who clotted together at midnight, who flowed back to Langley at dawn. She learned the waiters' names. She tipped in cash. She never ordered the same drink twice. Predictability is a trail. Novelty is a fog. Tradecraft wrapped the romance. Signals hidden in gestures. A scarf tied on the left meant go. On the right, no go. A brooch at 2 o'clock on a lapel meant new task. At 4, abort. A newspaper folded in thirds on the cafe table meant the bench is hot. She smiled at no one. Everyone smiled back. Good covers create their own weather. Thomas entered the syllabus as asset, access, analytical streams, vulnerabilities, idealism, loneliness. The case officers wrote in a clean hand. The center sent back questions that were colder than mathematics. Could he be moved to a higher classification pool? Could seduction yield methodology rather than paper? Could guilt be displaced by ideology? The answer was yes. Not by speeches, by small, precise pains. A story about a cousin who vanished in a factory raid. A pause before a goodbye. A night she didn't show. Honeytrap isn't only bodies, it's timelines. Make the operative crave the next meeting more than he fears the last one. Make absence feel like punishment, then offer forgiveness as a tasking. "I was busy," she would whisper, "but I thought of you when I read about that cable format." The human brain does the rest. He brings flowers and a routing scheme. The CIA knew the playbook. They ran it too. They called it Romeos in East Berlin, handsome men with state apartments and empty rings, but knowing the weapon and proving its use are different wars. Diplomatic immunity is a steel door. Love is a velvet key. Counterintelligence prefers screws and hinges. It doesn't see velvet until it's around the throat. Elena built legend inside legend. A Catholic childhood, a sick mother, a marriage that never took. All lies, all plausible in the brochure version of America she sold back to Americans. She made vulnerability a mirror. He showed her his fear of being ordinary. She showed him hers. "I don't want to disappear," she said once, voice breaking on cue. "Not in your country, not in mine." He promised she wouldn't. He meant it. Promises make excellent chains. She never filmed him. That was the myth. Pillows, cameras, blackmail, useful sometimes, but too loud for the long war. The better trap is internal. Make him complicit by choice. Make him the architect of his own cage. Give him 10 chances to stop. Let him take none. Then you own not the pictures. You own the story he tells himself to sleep. Moscow wanted pace. The center always wants pace. She argued for duration. Operations that last a season feed egos. Operations that last years feed nations. She asked for patience and got it because her reports didn't brag. They measured. How many seconds it took Thomas to copy a page. How many drinks before he volunteered an adjective. How many nights apart before he trembled when she entered the room. In the margins, her controller wrote a single word: reliable. They tested the leash with a controlled burn. A fabricated crisis. A draft memo accidentally left in a safe Thomas could open about a planned American approach to a Soviet colonel in Budapest. False, but plausible enough to matter. He photographed it. She delivered it. The colonel got protected by the KGB and moved to a safer post. A success that saved no one and proved everything. Thomas slept well that week. He believed he had prevented a murder. The leash shortened without touching his skin. For Elena, the danger wasn't the CIA, it was success. Every good operation attracts 2 predators, rival services and your own. A man with grey hair started appearing near her roots. Not FBI, not agency. The walk was wrong. The posture lacked American slouch. An internal watcher. She found a hair laid across her apartment doorframe and saw it on the floor when she returned. The message was clear. "We see you." She left a note for her handler in lemon juice on a napkin. "Surveillance high. Reduce exfil channels." The answer came as a blank postcard. Acknowledged. She pulled back from Thomas. Meetings moved to churches, laundromats, libraries where the sound of turning pages killed microphones. She made him do the work to find her. Scarcity accelerates dependency. He brought her poetry once, a thin book with margins too wide. She read the first page and smiled at the wrong line. He never noticed. He only saw the smile. Honeytrap demands exit plans. Lovers imagine forever. Officers imagine Tuesday. She rehearsed 3 endings. A diplomatic recall with honors. A staged car accident on a rain-slicked bridge. A slow fade into a different name in a different city, leaving Thomas to argue with ghosts. The KGB preferred the recall. Clean, countable. The men who planned such things always preferred numbers over hearts. Before any ending, there must be a moment that justifies the cost. It came in the form of a matrix, the CIA's internal decision tree for classifying and triaging Eastern European sources. Thomas didn't think it was valuable. It didn't have names. It had arrows, boxes, probabilities. He called it bureaucratic art. Elena looked at it and saw a weapon. With that schema, a skilled service could spoof source reliability, plant rumors calibrated to pass every filter, and starve the enemy of truth while feeding him a diet of almost truth. It wasn't a map. It was the ability to redraw someone else's map at will. She celebrated by not celebrating. No dinner, no champagne, just a hand held a second longer in a doorway. Joy is traceable. Routine is safe. She folded the matrix into the lining of a cheap raincoat and walked it into a pouch that would cross an ocean like a letter from nobody. Langley finally started saying the word mole out loud. A task force formed with a name that sounded like a dentist. The audits got sharper. The nights got longer. The questions got personal. Thomas lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. He told Eleanor he wanted to run. She told him running only changes scenery. Not hunters. The case officer informed her, "Prepare the close." She didn't argue. She knew the look in a doomed asset's eyes, a mix of love, fear, and math. He had started counting cameras where there were none. He had started inventing innocence for people who didn't deserve it. He had started to become a spook for real. That is the last stage. After that comes collapse. They met at noon in a crowd. Tourists, pigeons, an organ grinder who showed up on cue twice a month. She wore blue. He wore regret. She told him a half-truth, that her embassy was recalling staff. He told her a half-lie, that he could follow. She put a hand on his cheek like a benediction and delivered the final task, the only one she knew he would refuse if she asked for it any other way. "One last thing," she said softly. "Then we're done." It was small. It was surgical, a list of cable precedence codes used when Washington panicked. Not content, just the hierarchy of urgency. With that, you can time your disinformation like a drummer. You can make the rival service look slow when it must be fast. He hesitated. She looked at him with the face he believed. He agreed. The drop succeeded. The operation did too. The center approved her exfil window. A date, an hour, a car that would smell like cigarettes and winter. She slept that week for 4 hours at a time, which counts as peace in this line of work. On the morning of her exit, she saw him on the opposite sidewalk, watching a doorway that meant nothing. He had followed a rumor he invented to feel useful. She let him have it. Mercy again. Cruelty again. The car door shut. The city kept breathing. Somewhere, a file closed with a dry sound. Somewhere else, a different file opened with a wet one. Honeytrap wasn't romance. It was arithmetic performed with human heat. Elena didn't look back. Officers don't. They know the past is a mirror that shows a stranger. The operation entered the quiet part of its life, the part where history claims it was obvious and no one saw it at the time. Manuals were updated, lectures were written. Young officers learned the lesson and promised they would not be the next Thomas. Some kept that promise, most didn't. The heart is older than tradecraft. In the end, the weapon worked because it treated a person not as a target, but as a story. And once you become someone else's story, you stop being the author of your own. Question for you. Is it more dangerous for an intelligence service to be fooled by forged documents or by real feelings? Langley, 1965. Fluorescents hummed like bees, carpets swallowed footsteps, doors clicked with the softness of a secret. The word mole no longer lived in whispers. It sat on tables, in memos, in eyes. Thomas Reed felt the change before he heard it. Smiles shortened, elevators emptied when he stepped in. A schedule appeared on his desk that he hadn't asked for. Briefings moved, permissions trimmed, access rebalanced. The building had decided to breathe without him. Counterintelligence built a maze. Interviews that looped back on themselves, questions repeated a week apart to catch the drift. A friendly lunch that wasn't friendly, a coffee that was cold before it was poured. He answered like an analyst, clean and straight. He sounded reasonable. Reasonable is suspicious when the room wants fear. They pulled his phone records, then the records of people who called him. They charted his walks, they mapped his habits, they laid a transparency of his life over a transparency of failures overseas and looked for stars that aligned. A few did, a few always do. Patterns are nets. Guilt is a fish that knows how to look like seaweed. They brought him back to the polygraph. Same chair, same sensors, different questions. Not, did you give information to a foreign power? Too blunt, too easy to armor against. Have you ever withheld a concern about a colleague? Have you ever been ashamed of something you did not report? The needle spiked on shame. Shame is honest. That made it useful and useless at once. Thomas didn't confess. He compartmentalized. He shrank his world to a hallway, a desk, a locked drawer. He promised himself he could outlast suspicion. Then he found his spare key exactly where he hadn't left it. Perfectly placed, quarter turn wrong. A message. We are inside, and we are careful. The task force had a new tactic, provocation. They seeded a room with bait, a folder misfiled into his reach, a draft cable about a sensitive source in Warsaw, a conversation half overheard at the end of a corridor. He took none of it. He read nothing he didn't own. He moved like a man walking through snow, placing each foot into his old footprint to leave no new trail. It didn't matter. The snow was melting. Footprints changed shape on their own. He tried to find Elena where Elena no longer existed. Restaurants that remembered her reservation rhythm. A bookstore where the owner nodded at the name of a poet she had pretended to love. A church with a pew that held the ghost of a hand. Washington had a new season. She was gone the way dawn is gone, not erased, replaced. In Moscow, the file for Violet Sparrow closed with a final evaluation. Asset terminated clean, counterintelligence risk acceptable, long-term value sustained. In Langley, the file around Thomas thickened with acronyms: lead, flag, hold. The difference between the two bureaucracies was distance. One wrote in past tense, the other wrote in present. They tried kindness next. A senior who had once mentored him invited him for bourbon, talked about career paths, burnout, how the work sandpapers souls. He listened, and for a minute he believed that the world might still be gentle. Then the man asked one question too many about late nights and a particular printer. The glass went down, the mask went up, the minute died. When pressure fails, services add noise. Anonymous letters in interoffice mail. He's not one of us. Watch who he meets after hours. He read them and knew they weren't for him. They were for everyone else. Isolation isn't a room. It's a rumor in a chorus. The sting arrived dressed as an opportunity, a temporary tasking on a Saturday to collate interagency traffic for a Monday morning. A secure room with 2 terminals and a stack of unclassified covers that referenced classified cores. It was legitimate work. It was also a stage. They put a camera in the clock. They put a lens in the smoke detector. They put a man with a book behind a blind that didn't quite close. Thomas noticed the hum, the angle, the shadow. He noticed and kept working, not defiant, resigned. The decision to survive can look like guilt. He collated, he logged, he left. Sunday midnight, his badge stopped opening a door it had opened for years, a small beep, a red light. That is how careers end in buildings like this, with a tone you've heard 1,000 times, meaning something it never meant before. They called him in at dawn. No handcuffs, not yet. An interview room that pretended to be an office. Legal pad, 2 pens, one window that looked at nothing. A man from security, a woman from CI, a tape recorder that clicked louder than it needed to. They asked for a timeline. He gave them a life. Did you ever meet with a foreign intelligence officer outside official channels? No. Did you ever remove classified material from its proper container? No. Did you ever discuss your work with someone not cleared to hear it? Silence. The kind that lands like a stone. He thought of Elena's face, the way memory draws faces, softer, kinder, brighter than truth. He said, "Not intentionally." The woman wrote the words, "not intentionally," in block letters. Intention is a currency. He had just set a price. They showed him a photograph, his shoulder in a cafe window, a woman opposite blurred into harmlessness by technical failure. He knew the outline anyway. He felt his heart perform a trick, vanish, reappear, beat in the wrong place. Do you know this person? No. Do you know this cafe? Yes. Do you often meet unknown women in known cafes? He smiled then. A small, tired, human mistake. The man from security didn't. They moved to the edge, offers packaged as mercy. You are not the first good man to be used. We can help you if you help us. He asked what help meant. They said names, processes, everything you gave, everything you think you gave, everything you didn't realize you gave. The last category is where the real damage always lives. He asked for a lawyer. They ended the conversation. The recorder clicked again. The window kept looking at nothing. Suspension came with signatures. Badge surrendered, desk boxed, a security escort who walked half a step behind, like a shadow that had learned to lead, colleagues who watched the floor tiles to avoid his eyes. He counted the squares to the elevator and wished for a fire alarm. Fires are simpler than endings. Home felt staged when he opened the door. A drawer misaligned by a millimeter. A book returned to the wrong shelf, right author, wrong decade. He laughed once, a sound that belonged to no one. He slept for an hour and dreamed of chalk marks that wouldn't wash off. The bureau took its turn. Different building, same chairs. They offered a plea wrapped in patriotism. Cooperate and reduce harm. He asked to whom. They didn't answer. Harm is always plural. They brought a box of his life into the room. Ticket stubs, matchbooks, receipts. Proof that a man had lived in a city and touched it lightly. They laid out 2 matchbooks from the same cafe 4 months apart and called it persistence. He said it was habit. Both were true. Truth in rooms like this is a kaleidoscope. Twist and the pattern changes, same shards, new picture. Weeks became a weather system, rain on schedules, thunder in briefings, lightning in hallways where people spoke too softly to be heard and too loudly to be ignored. Somewhere overseas, an asset went silent. Somewhere else, a courier missed a step and didn't live long enough to miss a second, 'cause he's never clean. Correlation is a hammer. He started writing, not a confession, a ledger. What he remembered, what he imagined, what he feared he had given away in offhand words that felt harmless at the time. He wrote into the night, into the morning, into a place where the past became fiction, written by a man who no longer trusted his pen. The deal, when it came, was a hallway conversation. No drama, no scales of justice, administrative end, quiet exit, classification forever, the kind of finish that erases a name from a wall without removing the paint. He could take it and keep his freedom. He could fight and lose more than a career. He took it, most do. The system prefers quiet, so does shame. He packed a life into cardboard, a plant left for someone else because green things don't deserve this. A coffee mug that had learned the taste of his days. A framed diploma that looked like a joke when carried under an arm. He walked past a security desk he had saluted without thinking for years and didn't lift his hand. The guard didn't either. Outside, the city had the wrong light. He sat on a bench across from a building that didn't know him anymore and watched doors open for other people. He felt, with perfect clarity, the absence of a woman who had never belonged to him. He understood, too late and exactly on time, that he had never been her lover or her partner. He had been her vector, a direction by which information travels. A letter came months later with no return address. 10 words like before. You were never the villain. You were the reason it worked. No signature, no mercy. He burned it in a kitchen sink and watched the smoke climb into a ceiling that did not care. Across an ocean in a city that edits truth for a living, a lecture was given to a new class of officers. Case study, Thomas R., names redacted, lessons clear. Don't hunt the paper, hunt the pattern. Don't fear lust, fear loneliness. Don't forget that the most reliable lever is not desire, it is purpose. The students wrote it down like scripture carved into ice. He found a job that required no badge and clocked no secrets. He learned to be ordinary. It was harder than espionage. At night, he walked by the river and listened for a language that had once spoken through glances and chalk and coins warmed on windowsills. It didn't return. Languages die when no one answers. The fall of an agent doesn't break the world. It dents it. The dent remains long after the names have been buried under policies and promotions. Somewhere, an adversary still uses a matrix he helped deliver to move rumors like chess pieces. Somewhere, an analyst still trusts a source because a box on a flowchart tells her to. Consequences are the only artifacts that never declassify. Who kept one thing from the old life, the habit of checking reflections, not to see if he was followed, to make sure he was still there. Question for you. Si tu étais à la place de Thomas, choisirais-tu l'aveu pour sauver ta liberté, ou le silence pour sauver ce qu'il te reste d'honneur? Moscow, winter. The city clicked like a lock. Snow fell in disciplined rows. Men with no names smoked in doorways that had no addresses. Elena walked through it without leaving footprints. That was the point. Successful ghosts don't cast shadows. The debrief room was warm and airless. A clock ticked too loudly. Her file sat on the table like a verdict that already knew its outcome. 3 men. One asked most of the questions. One took all of the notes. One watched her pulse in her neck. She answered in sentences the training had taught her. Precise, bloodless, complete. No adjectives. Adjectives are where guilt hides. What did he give? Processes, not paper. Methods, not names. Routing schemas, priorities. The rhythm of an enemy's breath. Enough to bend a rival service without breaking it. Bend is better. Bent things keep working while pointing the wrong way. Her control officer offered tea. Congratulations lived in his eyebrows, not his mouth. Praise is rationed here. It keeps the hunger sharp. Paperwork closed around her like snowdrifts. Awards she wouldn't wear. Numbers she wouldn't see. A transfer. New legend under construction. Her own life dismantled into useful parts. Childhood, adjustable, accent, retuned by a teacher with a metronome. Faith, none, except the kind required for infiltration. She stepped out of Elena Morozova and into someone who wouldn't notice she had ever existed. But intelligence has gravity. The past pulls. She woke some nights in an apartment that was perfectly safe and perfectly wrong, tasting American coffee that wasn't there. She kept her hands still until the memory passed. Hands betray what mouths won't. They sent her to teach, not romance, repair. She trained new officers to read weakness the way pianists read scores, what to watch, the pause before a lie, the joke repeated from the wrong corner of a mouth, the way ambition enters a room before the person does. What to avoid, improvisation born of vanity. What to use, silence, absence, forgiveness as leverage. Students wrote everything. The smart ones erased their notes before class ended. She respected them for that. Her name moved through corridors as a code name and a boast. Violet Sparrow. In files, it was triumph measured in kilograms of microfilm that never existed. In rooms, it was a story told with fewer and fewer facts until it sounded like a parable. The version with a camera under a lamp, the version with a safe broken by lipstick, the version where love was real. She corrected none of it. Legends work best when they contradict themselves. Then the watchers turned, not enemies. Her own loyalty audits sweep the floor after every celebration. She noticed a tale that wasn't clumsy enough to teach. She found a hair she hadn't placed across her doorframe. She smiled at the microphone behind the radiator and read poetry to it out loud, changing a word in every stanza so the transcript would never quite rhyme. Paranoia? No. Procedure. A good service doubts everyone. A great service doubts its favorites first. They asked her to consult on a mirror case in Prague. Same pattern, reversed current, a Western Romeo working a minor official with major access. She dismantled it on a chalkboard. Not the kisses, the calendars, not the meetings, the Mondays they chose. She circled the weakness, loneliness disguised as duty. The room nodded in the way rooms nod when the target is far away and cannot bleed on the carpet. A letter arrived from Vienna in a diplomatic pouch with no sender. 10 clean words. You were the best of us. You lasted the longest. She burned it in a ceramic dish and pressed the ash with a spoon until it looked like the snow outside. Compliment or trap? Both, probably. The business prefers compliments that double as traps. It's efficient. Years passed, but not evenly. Time in this work is elastic. Missions stretch it thin until days are transparent. Debriefs crumple it into something dense that fits in a safe. She learned to age between tasks, not during them. She learned to keep a face that told the truth, slowly. Once on a delegation trip thinly disguised as culture, she saw Washington again from behind a windshield that knew too much. The river was still there. The lights still guessed at the shapes of monuments. She did not think of Thomas by name. Names reanimate the dead. She instead thought of vectors and maps, and one man's heartbeat recorded accidentally in the glass of a cafe window. She looked away before the past could recognize her. The center called her into a room that smelled faintly of new paint, promotion dressed as gratitude, a higher floor, a lower profile. She said yes because no is not a word in this vocabulary. She took a desk that looked out over the city and did not look out. Now and then, a case officer pushed for the old approach with the old hunger. Cameras. Blackmail. A door kicked at dawn. She rejected them with calm sentences about durability. Pictures by months. Conscription of conscience buys years. They accused her of sentiment. She answered with numbers. A junior asked her after class, and against his better judgment, if she had ever loved a target. She told him love was the wrong noun. The verb is use. He asked if that made them monsters. She said monsters are loud. We are quiet. That is worse and better. Spring cracked the ice on the Moscow River. A rumor moved through headquarters like a draft under a door. A Western operation had learned to fabricate us, to build women out of paper and perfume and sell them to lonely men with clearances. She read the cable and felt a small private pride pierce the larger, colder one. Techniques migrate. That is the true victory. A weapon becomes a language. The enemy speaks it with an accent, then without. Retirement appeared as a paragraph in a memo. It offered a dacha and the illusion of choice. She imagined a garden that didn't record her, a kettle that boiled for no reason but tea, a day measured by light instead of deadlines. She signed the form. She didn't send it. The service always needs one more lesson from the teacher who can still speak fluently about silence. They brought her a last problem, a compromise unfolding in slow motion inside a ministry that had forgotten to fear. The pattern was familiar. Attention starved, ambition fed, ethics negotiated in half steps. She wrote the counterplay in 6 lines. Break the rhythm. Insert shame where pride lives. Offer duty as absolution. It worked. It always works, until it doesn't. At night, she walked a corridor lined with photographs of officers who had earned the right to be remembered wrong. men mostly, a few women whose eyes met the camera with the indifference of clouds. She stopped briefly at a frame with no caption and saw in the glass the outline of her own face. The building kept her reflection the way a safe keeps a secret, not to protect her, but to protect itself. A file crossed her desk from a friendly service, declassified excerpts, sanitized, a case study from the other side. An American analyst destroyed by an unidentified foreign agent, redactions like snowfall. She read the shape of him in the blank spaces. He had learned to check reflections. He had learned to be ordinary. She closed the folder gently and returned it without comment. Mercy is also tradecraft. Winter again. A kitchen with a single light, tea steaming. She opened a drawer and found, beneath neatly folded dish towels, the minox she had never used on him. Not a relic, a reminder. Tools are innocent. Tasks are not. She set it on the table and watched the metal cool. In the mirror she wore the years well, no softness wasted, no hardness flaunted, a face that could still be anyone to anyone. She wondered, briefly, who she might have been if a different embassy had opened a different door at a different party. The thought lasted exactly as long as a match head. She wrote a final lecture for officers who had not yet failed. Title, Affection as Access, Ethical Considerations in Coercion-Free Recruitment. The ethics section was 3 sentences long. Do not lie to yourself about the nature of the work. Do not pretend your targets are worse than you. Do not confuse necessity with virtue. She delivered it without notes. The room was very quiet. On the way out, a young woman stopped her and said thank you in a voice that shook. Elena, or whatever name belonged to the badge that day, touched her elbow lightly and said, "Listen more than you speak." She did not add the rest, and listen most to the parts of yourself you don't want to hear. The city kept its appointments with snow. The river kept its appointment with thaw. The world turned. Services played their long games and called them peace. She stepped into the street, just another coat among coats, and felt a strange, precise truth settle where fear used to live. She had not won. She had not lost. She had performed a function. The function had consequences measured in lives she would never meet. That is what victory sounds like in this profession, the absence of applause. Somewhere far away, a man who once believed in clean lines and honest work checked a window for a face that would never appear. Somewhere else, a new story began with a smile that fit a room like a glove. Languages do not die, they migrate, they breed. She turned the corner and dissolved into the weather that made her. No farewell, no plaque, no anthem. The woman behind the curtain remained behind it, drawing lines on maps with a pencil that left no marks. The Cold War would end. Intelligence would not. Feelings would remain the cheapest weapon with the highest yield. Manuals would keep teaching it with clinical nouns that did not bleed on the page. Students would nod. Teachers would retire. The curtain would stay. She did not look back. Question for you. When the weapon is a feeling and the battlefield is trust, who carries the greater blame? The one who uses love or the one who turns it into a mission?